Reflection there.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so they have the mics up there.
Yeah, they were thinking away, but we thought it would handle it.
We have extra mics. No, everyone's been standing.
Yes, the same for the rest of the day. For sure. Oh, yeah, I feel like you chatted where the work plans and stuff. I'm sorry to tell you now.
All right, I better pay attention since. Oh no! Oh no! God! Oh gosh! Oh god! Oh god! These mic-
They get too close.
Yeah, and it went kind of crazy last session. Oh god! Oh god! Okay, go ahead. Start.
Looks like we're going on stage.
Oh.
We have.
Huh?
Because we're from the speakers, that's probably where the feedback's coming from.
And then Kelcey's coming.
Well, let's just sit on stage.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you could bring the chairs in. I don't know. That one's not running my. This is giving me anxiety. You guys have two. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Does it work better when we're up there?
Get 7 up. Hello. Hello.
Is that blocking?
Hello. 5. Are you guys gonna have questions too?
Yes.
Do you want to do questions like?
We gotta just like each block.
Oh, okay.
During the presentation. Basically, it's kind of like after.
Okay, sounds good.
Not the first time, which I think just during.
So do you want questions at the end or like throughout? Both?
We have
Throughout.
like
Throughout.
3 pauses. In
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll like read off for the chat box questions. Yeah. Or Onyx relevance or like the online folks. Hello. 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 Hello.
Swap 7 for 6.
Hello, good afternoon. Can anybody hear me?
Don't love this plan.
We each get one?
Hand me 7.
I don't know which one is.
Yeah. See how you like that.
And I did bring my black socks.
We might have some of the backpack.
Hello. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm making sure everyone can hear me right now. I see 1 thumbs up, so that's good. I see multiple. Thank you very much. Thank you for showing up and attending this session. This is a session on PPGs, performance partnership grants. We have me. My name is Howard Kahn. I work in the water tribal section, so I work under your water grants. I'm a project officer. Our 106 program, 319 program, and the wetlands program as well. I was going to introduce, we also were supposed to have Angela Mendiola from the Grants Management Office, but she's in the tribal roundtable meeting right now. So I'm going to be covering her part in the beginning as I just found out about this. So that's why you'll be seeing me looking at the little notes down here. I'll turn over to Tim to introduce himself.
And I'm Tim Wilhite. I work in the tribal section as a project officer. And between Howard and I and Angela, we're kind of the little PPG work group in the region. So we get, jewels like this. We get this kind of assignment. Yeah. Are we going to be able to let the folks that are on virtually introduce themselves now? We got 3 people that are going to be helping us. Okay. So Tanya, do you want to introduce yourself? You can unmute yourself and go for it.
Hey, Ann, can you hear me? Hello?
Nothing? Okay.
Can you see me?
How about
Can you hear
Rachel
me?
or Dan? Can one of you guys introduce yourselves? This may not work.
Hi, Tim. Can you hear us?
Let's see. Okay. This should be fun, man.
So we spent 4 hours preparing for this meeting to happen right now, and none of this went wrong during the practice sessions. So the other one is Tanya is one of our tribal representatives who's going to give an example of working for having a PPG from the tribal perspective. Dan and Rachel, they are EPA headquarters employees, and they're the ones that basically run the PPG program out of headquarters. And hopefully we have them scheduled to speak a little bit later. But until then, I'm going to start doing the introduction of what is a PPG. And we got breaks for questions at 3 separate points during the presentation for you to ask any questions. Now, this is the part that Angela is supposed to do. So I'm looking at my notes right here. So what is a PPG? So a PPG is a performance partnership grant, and it's a single grant that combines funds from 2 or more of 19 eligible categorical environmental program grants. PPG grants are funded through the
Hello?
categorical earmarks of the state and tribal assistance grants appropriation.
Hello, can you hear me?
The benefits of having a PPG is that it streamlines your paperwork and accounting procedures. It also provides direct resources to pressing environmental work and is ease to funding cross-cutting and multimedia projects. So with the PPG, you can kind of, the way that I describe it is it kind of mushes programs together into one grant. And for you tribes that are interested in PPGs, it kind of reduces the administrative burden, actually increases it on the EPA side. One of the questions asked for, again, for a grant program to be eligible for inclusion in the PPG, right now there's 19. It's only eligible to certain funds through that STAG funding. And if you're not familiar with that, don't worry. I don't know what that means either. And I'm on all the work groups.
Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, state and tribal assistance grant. No, I know what the letters stand for. So sometimes I know what the letter stands for, but actually, like, what means to be eligible, I'm not sure. So one of the common questions, like, how do we get our programs into PPG? And I'd always defer to someone else to answer that because I don't know the answer. With that, so today we're going to cover tribal PPGs, and this would be the part where we would turn over to.
Yeah, I'll love, while we're kind of stalling for time to see if our virtual presenters can come on, I just want to ask a few questions, which is anybody in the room here because you're interested in starting a PPG? I'm just curious. Okay. Is anybody in the room in a PPG now? Okay, a lot of people. Okay. Because we do have a section of our presentation just on how to initiate and manage PPGs. So we'll talk about PPG is a performance partnership grant. And if anybody is intimidated at all by a PPG and you're thinking about starting one, don't be intimidated because it's just like managing a regular grant, whether it's a water grant or a GAP grant or anything like that. And PPGs can be what we call multimedia. Anybody know what multimedia means? Media is like air, water, so it's a kind of an EPA-centric term. But you can have a 319 and 106. Everybody know what 319 and 106 is for Clean Water Act grants? Okay. So you can combine 2 of those grants, those 2 grants. That's all you need to go into a PPG. And we call that kind of a media-specific PPG. If you want to add GAP or air to that PPG, then you're crossing. You're going from one media to another, and we call it multimedia. That's all. So you can have, as a tribe, you can have more than one PPG. Some tribes, I think I knew of a tribe once that had GAP and air in one PPG and their water programs in another PPG. And to keep that straight, you just have to have a lot of faith and do a lot of talking with your finance folks and make sure that they charge the right work to the right grant. It can be a little bit tricky, but your finance folks probably know how to get through it. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about eligible activities in a PPG. And theoretically, in a PPG, you can work on any activities that fall under the purview of any of those 19 grants that you can put into a PPG. That's the theory. Typically, the only work you do in a PPG is related to the programs that are actually funding the PPG. So if you have 319, 106, and GAP in your PPG, you're probably always going to do work on those programs for a number of reasons. One being that if you didn't need money in those programs, you probably wouldn't have asked for it. So you probably aren't going to squeeze money out of those grants to do something else. But theoretically you can. You would just have to get permission from national program managers to switch your money from doing water work, for instance, to doing air work. And that just rarely happens in Region 9. I guess we can go on to the cost share, but I'm just, I'm curious. We'll let Howard go on and talk about the cost share, because that's one of the favorite things in a PPG is that.
Yeah, can you fast forward the slides to the one that says cost share? Yep, this one, one back. Yeah, so one of the great benefits about going into a PPG is now you don't have to put in a required match. This is a brand new thing. It just, got implemented on October 1st of 2021. And this is one of the benefits of going into PPG. If you didn't have a PPG, and if you had a standalone, a wetlands grant or 104B3 by itself, that's a 25% match that you have to put in on top of what the EPA grant funding would be. But if you said, hey, we want to include that into a PPG that we have or create a new PPG, that match automatically goes to 0%. And it's across the board for like every single grant program that belongs. If you put in the PPG, no match across the board. And this is one of the really great benefits to help and support tribes that just recently got put into place. The next one is maintenance of effort. That's no longer a requirement as well if you're going into a PPG. Again, if you're a standalone, like an air grant, you're gonna have to do maintenance of effort. We say, hey, we put that into PPG. That's not a requirement for you. The other one, the benefit of the flexibility of the program requirements. So you see, PPGs have their own statutory authority, but there's some program specific requirements that if you're in a standalone grant won't apply if you're in a PPG. GAP grants, they top out at 4 years, then you got to close out, start a new one. You put in a PPG, you got 5 years. So you got an extra year on that one. But I think a bigger one that on the 319, Clean Water Act 319, that's a non-point source pollution control program. There's in the Clean Water Act, it says there's a 10% limitation on administrative costs. But if you put that into PPG, you don't have to worry about that 10% limitation. And that's one of the benefits of going into the PPG on these cost share requirements. And again, the PPGs, they're out there to reduce kind of the administrative, efforts. I know the PPG, you only have to apply one time in grants.gov. So you just have one PPG application that goes through grants.gov. If you happen to apply for competitive funds, you have to put your competitive through grants.gov, basically kind of mark in there, just say, hey, we're going to include this in our PPG. And then once, when you guys get selected, and then your base, your regular other grants go grants.gov, we kind of, as Project Office EPA, we kind of combine that into one grant from you on our end. This is the part of there where we're going to take a pause to see if anyone has any questions related to PPGs.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we got one. We got the microphone coming for the people.
Yeah, my question would be. Okay. Yeah, my question is regarding PPG and GAP and potential disadvantages or advantages of having your GAP under PPG versus GAP as a standalone? I know you touched on it some, but if you could go into more detail.
Yeah, and we were going to have our virtual tribal speaker cover some of this, but I'll go into it. I mentioned that typically if you've got 3 or 4 programs in a PPG, you work on those programs in the PPG. One exception to that, or one nice thing about PPGs, is once in a while you guys overestimate how much money it's going to take to get all the activities in your work plan done, and you have money left at the end of a given year. When that money is left in the PPG at the end of a given year, you don't have to spend it on GAP as if you were in a GAP standalone. You don't have to spend it on 106. You don't have to spend it on 319. You get your choice at that point on what you spend it on. No questions asked. So if you have money left at the end of the year in a PPG and you know why you have it left, like you didn't get all your 319 stuff done, which is sometimes happens, then you should spend it on getting that done. But if you got everything done and you have money left over, you get to use it on what you need the most. And so that's kind of a difference between a standalone grant and having a PPG. It widens your flexibility when you have carryover funds for sure. And that, I don't know how we're going to do on the tribal speaker coming in, but that's a, go ahead. Oh, there's a question. But one advantage there is that you can tackle emerging issues. You can use that money to tackle something you never tackled before.
Sort of on that same topic, I was told that if there are issues with one of the grants in that PPG, as far as that would negatively impact, it would negatively impact the other grants in that PPG as far as being able to obtain future funding for those other grants that are also in that PPG. Is that true?
It's kind of a, it's kind of a yes and no, at least in the way I see it. It's a yes and no. Typically, if you're having an issue and it's administrative issue with tracking expenditures, it's usually a universal issue. If you're having trouble tracking your expenditures, you might get a pause in your PPG and all of your programs. But there are times when maybe, say you're getting a pause in your GAP funding because of performance issues in GAP, it doesn't mean that you're also going to get the same issue with water, because you might have 2 different sets of people running those programs. And so water could still fund that PPG even though you were on pause with GAP, and vice versa. It works both ways. So yeah. But if it's a universal issue like expenditure tracking or not having reports in or something like that, yeah, the whole thing would go down.
Yeah, I think it was more of a performance issue specifically related to GAP, because that tends to be the most strict of the grants as far as meeting those objectives. So if it is a performance issue in GAP, what I'm hearing you say is it does not necessarily impact the ability to obtain future funding from other grants in that PPG.
No, it wouldn't. As long as we had 2 of the programs that were still intact, 2 out of the 3 or 4 or 5, you could still funnel money into those until you got your performance issues ready for GAP. So, so I'm not sure that HOOPA is going to be able to come on, so I'll tell a little bit of their story.
If we're going to project Excel events on, so that might go down, but I think that might solve the problem. Or how can we make that show up there?
While we're waiting, everybody that has only 2 programs in their PPG, I just want to see raise a raise of hands. Two programs only in a PPG? Okay, how about 3 or more? 4 or more?
Like, what's projecting
5 or
that?
more?
Is that computer projecting that?
Okay,
up?
so in this room,
good-
there are some people that had 4 programs. Yeah, nobody has all 19, right? That probably doesn't happen in the tribal world. It might happen in the state world. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think all 19 programs are like active right now. Some kind of are just like on our like our EPA books when they got funded like in whatever the 90s or something like that. But they do have some of the new programs that have come in, like the multi-purpose program. When that came
Just
in,
drag that over
they
here.
made that one eligible to be included in the PPG, but fortunately that doesn't have any funding in it anymore.
We're still waiting, so I just, does anybody have a success story for a PPG where they, oh, Tanya, can you talk?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
You can hear me?
Audio output in settings.
Yeah,
maybe?
is that a yes? I got Daniel saying yes. Does anybody else hear me?
We can hear you virtually, but I don't think they can hear us in the room yet.
Yeah, we can't hear you guys yet. Are you guys off mute?
Yes.
Okay, you're off mute. Okay.
Let's see.
I can try. Sorry, guys. This was all working earlier, maybe.
Let me turn my camera off.
So again, everything is running as expected. This was part in our practice session. We actually had this exact scenario happen intentionally, that we're going to have it and not be able to talk to them the whole entire time. Sure.
Can you say something?
Okay, can everybody hear okay?
Yeah, actually that works.
Great.
We could have like everyone call someone and just keep the phones up here. I don't know. No, you're welcome to hang on to my phone.
All right.
That's the Dan phone.
Dan, yep, and that's no longer working. How's this, Dan? Can you try again?
Okay. Can you hear okay now?
Nope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this isn't working as well. Now, Tim, you want to move into the next part? So we're going to continue with the next part. Roles and responsibilities.
All right, we'll move into the roles and responsibilities of the EPA and your PPG. And I'm just going to list some things. Some of them you've never heard of. The regional administrator has a role in your PPG. How often have you seen the regional administrator interact with your PPG, though? It doesn't happen very often. How about the grants management officer, Carolyn Trong? Anybody seen Carolyn Trong? Okay. Okay. Angela, come on up. But here's one I know you guys have all interacted with. Have you guys ever interacted with a grant specialist? How many people have interacted with a grant specialist? Okay. All right. So just so you know, that behind the scenes, between the project officers and the grant specialists, that's how your awards get to you eventually, after quite a bit of wrangling, I would say. Then we have in a PPG, if you have 3 programs and you have water, gas, and air, who is the lead project officer? Do you guys know who and why? Okay. And so that's something that we decide internally based on workload, how big a tribe is in the water versus how big they are in the gap and things like that. And so we have a person on our side we call the lead PO. And that lead PO is no different than the technical POs, which would be your gap project officer, your water project officer, or your air project officer. The only difference is, unknown to you guys and unseen to you guys, is that the lead PO pushes all the buttons behind the scenes to get the award out. But they have no more power, no more say, no more anything than the other POs that you're working with. So then we have a thing called NEPS coordinator. And Angela, do you want to explain what NEPS is? Come on. And you can do the OCIR too. That's it. That's what you are.
So, hello, I'm Angela Mendiola. I'm the recently Associate Grants Management Officer. I apologize for being late. Thank you for my colleagues here for starting the presentation. I was in the Tribal Leaders Roundtable. So anyway, just finished. So I think, Tim, you want me to cover the NEPS coordinator. So so I think it was Dan Murphy who was, or they do the NEPS program. Someone who was on the screen that we weren't able to connect with. But every region has a NEPS coordinator. I am involved with that in the grants office. It is an opportunity for us to talk with our headquarters staff in regards to doing more PPGs and other ways in which we can do more collaboration on that front. And should I go down to OCIR? Okay, and OCIR is the Office of, what does OCIR stand for? I know Dan Murphy was supposed to be on the call and he is from OCIR. Julie?
Can you hear okay, Angela?
Office of Congressional Intergovernmental Relations. They are also our headquarters folks, and they are actually the PPG National Program Manager. So if anybody is familiar with what is a program manager, Dan Murphy and Rachel Congdon, I believe, are the national program managers for PPGs.
And that's just, I know that maybe you guys are curious of how the big picture works. And so for Howard and I and Angela to do our jobs, and we're the ones with our fingers on the keyboard getting your awards out. It takes folks at headquarters to run the national program, to set goals and things like that. And that's what Dan and Rachel, two of the presenters that were supposed to be on here today, that's what they do at the headquarters level. So next we'll have Howard talk about administering PPGs. Oh, I got it. Oh.
Next slide, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I was hoping there'd be folks in here who actually wanted to initiate a PPG, because what we wanted to do was set you at ease if you thought it was really hard. And these are really homegrown things up here. There's no blueprint for this. You won't find this in the regs. It's nowhere in the regs. So it's just homegrown. So you just do a little research, which is what some people could be doing here today. You let your gap PO know, your air PO, your water PO, whoever's involved would be involved in your PPG. Just let them know that you want to go into a PPG and you want them to do the magic behind the scenes to make it work. Okay? So we carry a lot of the burden getting you into a PPG. And if you just ask, we'll do it. We've done it hundreds of times. We know how to do it. And so if anybody is ever anxious about getting into a PPG, you shouldn't be. And we want to make sure that, you know, you feel comfortable calling us and say, we want to get into a PPG. You want to let your finance people know, especially if you go into a PPG for sure, because they're going to want to know how to set up an accounting code for it. And they're going to want to know what the rules of setting those accounting codes up are. So that's one of the advantages of PPG. We talked about that administrative cost savings in a PPG. If you have 4 programs in your PPG, under a normal system, your finance folks would be tracking 4 primary accounting codes with about 15 or 20 sub-accounting codes underneath that. That's a lot of tracking. Under a PPG, they can narrow that down to 1 primary accounting code with just their sub-accounting codes below that. So that's a big deal for your finance office. You definitely want to work with them close. You could develop a table, of all your grants that you want to go into the PPG and look at the project periods and see if they're going to sync up, and if not, how you can make them sync up. And we can help you and give you tips on how to do that. Sometimes you have a grant that starts on July 1, sometimes August 1. The rest of them might be by fiscal year. So how do you get them all to come to the same project period? That's what we would do behind the scenes. We would start helping you decide how to do that. Pick a start date. And here's the thing about a PPG. Has anybody in here ever seen a funding notification for PPGs? A funding notification for PPGs. So they don't exist, just so people know. So what you'll do in a PPG, if you have 3 programs, you'll respond to 3 different funding notifications. And Howard's the 319 guru. You'll probably be working with Howard or somebody like him to get your PPG work plan and budget in place. You might be working with me to get your GAP work plan and budget in place. And you might be working with somebody else to get your air budget and work plan in place. Once you have all that in place, the project officers put their heads together. We give you a call and say, how are things going? How about this for an application due date? And so we'll give you a custom application due date based on making sure that all your work plans and stuff are ready to go. And then when you go into grants.gov, it's just like doing grants.gov for a single program. And then we have all kinds of little tools for you. What you'll want to do, to get to that 424 page where you actually put the total amount, or you put the amount for each line item. That's actually the combination of all your budgets from all the programs that are going into the PPG. So that's all it is. It's just real simple math to come up with the PPG budget. And then you just submit that single PPG application and you're pretty much off to the races. So, and remember that all 19 programs in that PPG are all working from the same reg. They're all under 40 CFR Part 35. So once that stuff goes into a PPG, the rules are the same for all the programs in the PPG.
Next slide, please. So next one is talking about administrating a PPG, but generally administrating a PPG is just like administrating your standalone grants that you have. There's not much. You're still going to be working with your project officers, your main point of contact as well. And that's when, the first thing, keeping, good contact with your project officers, grant specialists as well. Same with providing your quarterly reports, your expenditure reports, and your FFRs. We have the samples that you see in our templates. Use like your GAP one, for example. We have the water ones. They're functionally exactly the same, the ones that we can do and provide to you. Always reach out to your project officers for coordination as well. Adjust your budgets and work plans periodically over the course of the year. Your priorities, your tribal priorities might change. If that happens, contact your project officer, say, hey, this is the change. We had funding for this event. We want to move it towards a different category. Talk to them so we can make that done again for us as project officers to help support you. Copy all the POs, project officers on emails regarding your PPG. So that's just kind of coordination. If you, instead of just emailing your GAP project officer, if you had a GAP standalone, you do your GAP project officer and your water project officer, so PPG, so we got to communicate on our side as well. Again, address any program specific issues with your project officer. We also do the contact between us as project officers and information as well. And sometimes share your common costs, prorated or other fashions across all programs. So essentially, if you want to, buy new tools, equipment, supplies for that situation, and it's going to be used like evenly between the GAP program and the water program. You can like split up, 50% between the two. We have other mechanisms to divide that as well. That can be used depending on what your situation is. But again, most of this administrative PA is like good communication with your project officer, good communication with your grant specialist, and have good deliverables that you submit to us as well. And with that, we pause for questions. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was going to do that. Jeez. So no questions. I guess we're turning it over to Julie now. Yes.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Malazzo. I work for headquarters in the Office of Grants and Environment, but for now, we're going to pretend that I'm Dan Murphy in the Office of Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations. Just picture me about 3 feet taller, and you'll have it down. So OCIR is working on a PPG best practices guide. There was one that was published in 2011. It was a little bit light on implementation guidance. It kind of just pulled from a lot of different sources and said, you can do all these things, but it didn't really tell you how to do them. And so it's been on their list for a while to update the best practices guide for today based on some lessons learned, make some of the language more clear if it wasn't in the past. And they've been working pretty hard on it. So they want to update it to include current grant policies. They're reformatting it. They're highlighting the flexibilities available to tribal recipients. I think they're going to have to just get rid of the match information completely, since match is no longer required for PPGs. That's one of the huge flexibilities that you have, especially with all this increased funding coming. It has to hopefully be a relief to not have so much or any actually match that you need to come up with. And it's going to be posted as a living document. We found that when we post things and just make them static documents, they quickly get outdated. We constantly have questions about PPGs, best practices. We're constantly learning things, constantly, reconfiguring things. And so the idea is to really make this a living guide for you that is applicable, when you need it, and not just stagnant. Next slide. Okay, so the next steps are to conclude the internal review. They do have a work group from across the EPA, a lot of folks with experience working with tribes, and then they're going to send it out externally for review. They definitely want input. It needs to be a useful guide. That is the entire goal. But sometimes we just need to get stuff organized internally first, because we can have some interesting discussions that need to get sorted out. We might have to talk to our lawyers a little bit just to make sure we're all on the same page and get it right. And then once that is updated and ready, it's going to be posted on the NEPS website. That's a really good website to check out even now. If you just type Google NEPS, it has a lot of helpful information. It shows you the eligible programs that you can put into PPGs. It has a lot of great information in there. And the plan is to update it quarterly. So that is very much a living document. It's a great goal to have. I don't know if there's more. No? Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll add about the best practices guide, because I'm one of the participants. This would be for Dan and Rachel, who've really been running it and where it's at. I think this new version is a lot better than the initial version. It's currently formatted like pre-award, post-awards, have to get grant agreement, then how to close out. And it's designed to be more helpful for both EPA staff and tribal staff for managing PPGs. I think when the initial one was put out, there wasn't that many PPGs. And now this one is trying to answer some of those more complex and harder questions that have come up through the tribes actually managing it and asking us as EPA, what do we do in this situation? I can't remember all the stuff that we have kind of in there and kind of brought up. We had initial work groups and meetings to discuss it, but more specifics on what happens if you get competitive funds, how to include that into PPG. There's a section on how do programs get eligible to be included in PPG? If there's a new grant program comes out, can it be incorporated in PPG? How does that work? And if you have any questions or topics, let us know. I think they might be listening in, so they can let it know to see if they can, answer that and include that into the best practices guide. From what I heard, I think they're getting other people, internal EPA, to review it again before, and then the next step would be going out to the external review for everyone here to make their comments on the document before it gets more final. I'm very excited for it. I think it's a lot better than the initial one, and I think it's going to be really helpful for us on the EPA side to help manage PPGs better when those kind of issues or unique questions arise that we really haven't dealt with before, and have kind of more consistency across the board in managing PPGs.
And since Tanya wasn't able to join us from HOOPA, I want to kind of tell a couple of their successes with the PPG. Anybody, how many people out there are monitoring water quality? Okay, a lot of people. Anybody having blue-green algae issues, cyanohabs, algae blooms and stuff? Okay, HOOPA is located on the beautiful, clear, cold Trinity River, but that was pre-climate change. And so for years and years, they didn't have to worry about cyanohabs. And then all of a sudden, they start getting blue-green algae in the eddies and stuff. So they had some carryover money one year, and that was an emerging issue that they really, really needed to address. And they needed to buy some fairly expensive probes. And they had to, basically, they wanted to buy a subscription to a GOES satellite so that the monitoring was shipped up to the satellite and they could get it a lot quicker. So that was just an example of something they could do with a PPG with carryover funds that they may not have been able to do with their other grant, their standalone grants. Base budgets in 106, 319, GAP, AIR, it's hard to squeeze money into your base budget for a big purchase like that. And so the PPG helped them on that. And they also mentioned that their council is a little bit leery of endorsing grants that have high matching costs or even fairly small matching costs. And so the fact that they could get a relief from matching costs on their PPG was a big plus with their council, because the council sees those matching costs as liabilities and that they're going to have to put money toward. So some of the savings they would use by saving money on a matching cost, you guys know the tire residue chemicals are starting to get into waterways and affect fish populations. So they were able to squeeze money, probably because they didn't have a match, into starting to monitoring that. And so that's an emerging issue that they were able to address, partly because they had a PPG and lower matching costs. So the power of a PPG, it can work for you, but even though we are sounding a little bit like salesmen, we're not meaning to. And just so everybody knows, at Region 9, we don't really go out and stump and ask you to start PPGs. It's kind of a tribal choice. And it's based on how your programs are mixed up and stuff like that. Mostly we wanted everybody to know that we're here if you want to start a PPG, and we can help you get into one. But right now I want to get you guys talking because you're way too quiet. So does anybody have a PPG success story they'd like to share? Oh, do you have a question? All right, runner.
See if that's okay. So I'm a little new to, the whole grant process. So sorry if this is a real basic question, but do you have to apply to the individual grants before the PPG? And if so, then would we have to still have that cost share requirement, and then it would be waived by the PPG?
So the answer to that is no. So to start it, basically just talk to your project officer, say hey, we want to do a PPG, and pretty much we'll say yes to that. And then when you say that, you don't have to include the cost share. You're going to have to submit one application in grants.gov, and that would be just for the PPG. If you're going to use like gap and water, say combined together, when you submit your draft, when did you guys, like January 15th-ish? Yeah, so like the gap draft, you just send like your draft gap work plan by email to your project officer, your water one by our dates, February 1st for 106, end of February for 319. And those are just drafts. So we can kind of look and comment on your draft work plan and budget. And after we make those comments, we'll get back to you. We'll send you a letter, an email, like a funding letter or guidance letters, what we used to call them. And then you'll submit the one application into grants.gov. That's it. Yeah. All that I said is for base only, though. If you're applying for competitive funds, you need to put a separate competitive application into grants.gov. And then probably time-wise down the road, you have to put in one with your base program. So competitive has to go in, grants.gov has to go with the grants.gov, program codes and all that information. In your proposal, you just put like a sentence there saying like, hey, we're going to include this in our PPG. And in the budget section, you won't have a match for competitive though, but you need to put that in, which will be separate from the base one you submit in grants.gov.
I just wanted to also add that when you are applying, you would fill out, it's called a standard form 424, and that is the one application that we're referring to as to what you would submit into grants.gov. And on that 424, you would put under the assistance listing PPG, and that is how you will notify folks at EPA that you are applying for a PPG.
And
do you guys provide training for beginners on how to manage these grants?
So part of the outreach that we're doing now is this PPG 101 training, because it was requested as far as what is a PPG, how do you manage that? Additionally, at least on the administrative side with the grants branch and the grants office, we will work with recipients one-on-one. We could provide an outreach if requested, and we would walk you through some of the administrative requirements to make sure that you're managing, or you know what to do when you get that grant award. And that you know all the requirements that are being asked in the award, such as your terms and conditions, if you have specific reporting requirements, things like that. And as a grant specialist in the grants office, we would work in conjunction with the project officer, the program folks, and together we would provide that kind of ongoing support. Direct ongoing one-on-one support. So what I would suggest, if you're interested in that, reach out to your grant specialist and or your project officer, and we can go ahead and get that coordinated, because that is something that is we've been doing that for a number of years now due to COVID and all that. We've been doing more virtual outreach, but that is something, at least in our grants office, we would like to be out more on site as well.
So I was remiss too. I remembered another thing Hoopaw said they enjoyed about the PPG, which, you guys just scratch and claw for what little funding you can get. And when you're dissected into individual programs, it's sometimes hard to squeeze enough money into those programs to hire a full-time person. And it's hard for people to work for less than full-time. So in a PPG, you can blend that money a little bit better, and it's a little bit easier to predict how many full-time people you can support with that money. So Hoopaw thinks it's easier to run a holistic program under a PPG. It's just a little bit less dissected. It's the same crew, the same director, and they're just working as one group. So that was one of the things they wanted to bring up. Anybody willing to give us a PPG horror story or a success story or anything? We have a taker. Oh.
I was unaware that I volunteered. That's okay. can I sit? Do you want me to stand? This is okay. So hi, I'm Kelcey. I'm the environmental director for Pechanga. We currently have a PPG primarily for our water program. We started off with our Clean Water Act 106 funding and Clean Water Act 319 baseline funding as a PPG, and we did that for a couple of years. As of last fiscal year, we were also able to add in our wetlands program funding, and for the first time, we were funded for our Clean Water Act 319 competitive grant. So we now have 4 grants in the same PPG. I will say, the benefits of being able to move money around a little bit easier between the grants has been wonderful. It was especially useful during COVID. Not that, it has to be a major issue to need this feature, but during COVID, we had a lot of changes, not just to the work plan, but shifting, staff load on different grants around. And it made the whole process for us a lot easier. So that's been really helpful. We've had our PPG for, gosh, I think at least 10 years now. So we just finished out at the end of September with a 4-year closeout. So yeah.
We got one.
I've just been trying to think how to phrase this. So I'm Emily, Water Program Coordinator with Buena Vista Rancheria Miwok Indians, and we have a PPG with 4 programs. Clean Water Act Section 106, 319, GAP, and the Wetlands Program, which was most recently added. So we manage everything internally as separate, even though it's all within the PPG, we still track financially everything separately. And I'm kind of curious if that is standard for, for other tribes, if others are kind of still on the financial side running those programs as, single budgets, because that's how we're currently doing it, or if others are actually combining those into one budget. And even though, each program has its own work plan that, those budgets are applying to, if there are people who have a little experience that could talk to that, of managing it as still, 4 separate budgets that you're tracking and, or just one single budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is that the way you set your accounting codes up, it's your choice. You can narrow down to one primary accounting code if you want, and you can track 4 or 5 if you want. It's up to you. And there are different reasons for doing it different ways. Some people have big enough budgets that they might have a director and then associate directors, and the associate directors are each responsible for their own budget, making it come in and get the work done. And so if you want to keep that kind of program going, just like 4 individual grants or something, you're welcome to. Most tribes, after they get comfortable with the PPG, just because of the administrative savings and the simplicity, they'll narrow it down to one accounting code. And then internally, if you want to keep track in a cuff account type of system, an informal system, you can do that. So there's no one shoe fits all. It's a tribal choice on how you want to set your accounting codes up. But I know this, it needs to be one primary accounting code and then sub accounting codes under it, because you want to query all those expenses for your FFR as one pot of money. And if you don't, it gets really, really complex. So
yeah, this is Ryan Eberly with Gila River Indian Community. I'm the acting director. We do exactly that. So we have one primary accounting code with sub accounting codes. It's a little bit of a challenge because they're still all separate. We have challenges on the management side because like we have a 106 and a 319 in a PPG, but they're managed by 2 different programs. So one is managed by the water program, the other is managed by our wildlife program. And so it becomes a little bit of it's a little more administrative work on our end to kind of coordinate the reporting, to coordinate the financial pieces, and also to hold the program managers accountable for their piece within that one primary fund. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge. Not to mention trying to keep all those sub-accounting codes straight when you're running reports.
Can I ask a question or should I? Hello, my name is Sean Parker, White Mountain Apache Tribe. You guys talked about the cost shared for this year. Is that something we should expect every year, or is it just this year type thing?
Yeah, it was effective October 1, 2021. So any
last year.
grant that was awarded on or after that date. So unfortunately, anything that the award was made prior to that, it still applies. But October 1 onward, and I believe it's ongoing. There's no term limit. Julie says it's not coming back. And I don't know, Julie, if you actually took or said this, but Julie, sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot here. She was pivotal in the conversations and that decision to really push that forward at the headquarters level. And I know she worked with many people, right? But she really led that. So just thank you to Julie. I know she wouldn't probably say that about herself, but I just wanted to shout you out, Julie.
My name is
Thank you,
Josephina Rivera from the Colorado River Indian Tribes. I'm the administrative assistant. We also have one main account for our PPG, and we do have our sub accounts. I find it easier because our accounting department has a lot of turnover. So when they get new employees, it's easier for them to track it that way because they get confused. What I learned over the past 13 years I worked there, that they get confused with it all being combined and how each program has its own budget. And so for our tribe, what I've learned with my accounting department, it's easier to track with the sub accounts. So that's what we do at CRIT.
So you combine them?
No, well, we have like our main account. It's like a 407 is what we do it internally. And then we have our sub accounts to follow the second set of codes after the 407. Like the CWA 106, 319 is 407. And then it has its 3 account numbers after that. And then the GAP and then the FIFRA.
And another best practice to be mindful of too is as you're looking at the spending down on the budget, however you choose to do it, that you're also being mindful of the work plan, deliver the things that you're accomplishing too. That you put forth a work plan to say you're going to do certain things, and just to make sure that the work accomplished matches what drawdowns and money you're spending. And it's just a best practices tip for folks. All right, I think there's
just a
yep.
quick question. See, the guy's running and telling you got 1 minute left. Anyway, what the gentleman was describing, and having to deal with the complexities of their internal management. And I know at Pyramid Lake, we've got a PPG, in our water quality program. And so with regard to what was also said from CRIT, and you mentioned best management practices. I mean, I think it's one thing to see a manual and seeing, steps, on the page, but when you actually get into the practice, it's just like reading a manual to tune up your saw or your small engine or your car. You could read what's in black and white, but until you get the wrench and you actually get hands-on, it's a lot different than what you're reading. And so I'm just wondering if there are do's and don'ts. Are there things that can describe limits on what can be done using a PPG?
Yeah, I think they've been kind of covered in a way here. Some people, choose to go to one accounting code. It simplifies things. So for some people, that would be a do. Other people have different arrangements within their tribe, and they have multiple programs that need to watch their own budgets. And so when you have a system like that, you just basically make your accounting codes match that system. Those are the do's and don'ts. I think we're ready to wrap it up, but thanks for participating. And I guess it's off to the next presentation, wherever you're going. Have a good one.
My God, Tim, how you were like on,
Yeah.
so you were like on your own.